During the first centuries of the Roman Republic, artists strongly reflected Etruscan influences. With the expansion of the empire, the Romans were exposed to the arts of other cultures. They absolutely loved Greek art and Greek culture, and they especially loved Hellenistic art. There's a famous quote that says, "Rome conquered the Hellenistic world, but Greek culture conquered Rome." It's not necessarily true, but you get the point. Greek culture did become very important, and Greek art did become very important to the Romans. The Romans used Greek designs, orders, and imported Greek art and artists. Imperial art drew inspiration from the Republic art, Etruscan art, and Greek art. It created a Roman form of idealism. It was grounded in the appearance of the everyday world. So basically, like, if the Greeks are known for idealism, the Romans are known for their individuality. So when the Romans were producing their art, instead of doing like that universal idealism that the Greeks used, where everything's perfect, the Romans would take a portrait of somebody and it would look like that person, but it would be like heavily airbrushed. Imperial art was all about the empire. It was about the state. It was absolutely art for propaganda. Portraits continued to be produced in the imperial period. Also, art was created to record contemporary historic events on arches, columns, and mausoleums. So we actually really haven't seen this that much, except, well, not recently, not in the Greek period. They prefer to depict legendary events, but the Romans like to depict contemporary historical events. Now, the arches, columns, and mausoleums were created in public places for everyone to see. So again, they're creating this art as propaganda. An example of propagandistic art and portraiture is the Augustus Prima Porta. This is a copy. The original was bronze and it was produced in 20 BCE. This one was discovered in the villa of Livia, who is Augustus's third wife, at Prima Porta. Prima Porta is a suburb outside of Rome. Prima Porta literally means first door, and it refers to an arch in the aqueduct in the city, which served as the gateway for travelers and marked that they were reaching Rome. This statue was insanely popular. There are at least 148 replicas that we know about today. That were produced during this period. We can see how it's similar to the orator that you read about in your book from that Roman Republic period. But here we have a new purpose dominating the composition, and this is to promote Augustus as the ruler of Rome and a military victor. He has the gesture of the orator. And just to remind you what the orator looked like. So he has that same gesture of the orator. So he could be like addressing the troops or the Senate. It uses the idealized proportions of Polykleidos, and it is a portrait, but it is extremely idealized. Augustus here is depicted as this male, athletic, thin, youthful man, but in real life, Augustus was thought to have been rather short. He was missing a lot of his teeth. He was bald at this point in his life. Now, throughout his rule, despite his age, he was always depicted as a vigorous young ruler. And in that way, it's very much like Egypt. But it's all about promoting the image. And Egypt was kind of doing the same thing as well. So it's meant to look like Augustus, meant to be recognizable, but he is severely airbrushed. There's actually a lot going on in this image. It's really heavily loaded with propagandistic aspects. So we have Augustus. He's meant to be referred to as this orator, so he's meant to be kind of an intellect, but he's in military garb, so that means that he is also a military leader. We also have mythological references to give him more power. So Cupid is depicted right here, and of course remember Cupid is the son of Venus, and he is riding a dolphin. This is supposed to be a connection because the Julians, who Augustus is a descendant of Julius Caesar, and the Julians were supposed to be descendants from Venus and Aeneas. So that could be what the connection is there. Some people think that the dolphin itself is referring to either the birth of Venus, because when she was born she rose from the sea, or Augustus's naval victory at Actium. So in addition to those references, we also have a lot going on in his armor. Up here at the top, we have the Sphinx, and the Sphinx represent Augustus's defeat of Cleopatra in Egypt. Here we have the sky god, and he is spreading the tent of the sky. And this is to represent Romans' rule over everything that the sky touches. We have a goddess here, maybe Sol, the sun god. We have Luna and Aurora here. We also have Apollo over here, who is Augustus's patron god. And then we have the goddess Diana. Now the goddess Diana is significant because she actually serves the hunt. She's the goddess of the hunt. And the hunt actually serves as a metaphor for warfare. We also have the earth goddess down here. And some other connections to warfare besides Diana is we also have the soldier over here. But this is an interesting image because it's actually not promoting warfare. So even though Augustus is depicted as a warrior clad in this armor and as this military leader, the iconography on his breastplate is actually showing peace. So this Roman soldier is actually getting the Roman standards from the king of Parthia. So Rome actually had a lot of problems with Parthia, which is in northeastern Iran. When Mark Antony was a general, he and many others went into Parthia and they couldn't defeat them. And in fact, Mark Antony lost the Roman standard, which is like the flag. So basically they captured his flag. When Augustus comes to power, he actually negotiates with Parthia to get back the standard. So he uses diplomacy, not warfare, to get back the flag and basically to take over Parthia. So the breastplate is depicting this event. It's showing how powerful Augustus is. Yes, he is this powerful military leader. We know that because here he is dressed in this military garb. But he is also this leader of peace, and he's issuing in an era of peace. And this is really important to the Roman people because they had been living through civil war after civil war after civil war, and there had been a lot of warfare actually in Rome. They don't care if there's war going on like with the Roman soldiers in Gaul or wherever else, that's fine. But when the wars are brought to Rome, or at least nearby, they really don't like that. So they were ready for peace. And so Augustus is bringing them that peace. Now with that peace comes prosperity, and that's why we have the earth goddess depicted here. So it's saying with Augustus's power, and with him he's bringing this peace, and with peace comes fertility. Also, the earth goddess is actually placed in an area that's quite near his genitals. So that's actually supposed to show him as this fertile leader as well. We also see the cost of war. So we have these people mourning at the cost of war on either side. So again, it's basically saying, yeah, we had this terrible time of war, but now the great Augustus is here. And he is a great warrior, but he doesn't need to use warfare to get us what we want. He can bring peace. And we also have this nice reference to the origins of Rome with this Roman she-wolf. So very complex, very much promoting the iconography of Augustus. After Augustus, we see a series of emperors. Some of them are good and strong, and others not so much. One of the not so great rulers was Nero, and he ruled from 54 to 68 CE. Now Nero was likely insane, or it certainly sounds like that he was. He was the emperor, but he also fancied himself a musician, an actor, a poet, and things like that. He held concerts and invited people to come. Okay, that doesn't sound so bad. Sounds like he was an entertaining fellow. Except for, supposedly he wasn't very good. And if you left or you didn't show up, he would actually have you decapitated. So that didn't work out so well for you. In 64 CE, Nero was in southern Italy, and he was giving one of these concerts. And he was playing a violin-like instrument. Meanwhile, a large portion of Rome caught fire and was destroyed. So that's where maybe you hear the expression, Nero fiddled while Rome burned. So indeed, he was giving one of his concerts while Rome burnt to the ground. So Rome burned to the ground, and private homes, temples, and businesses were all burned. So when Nero returns to Rome, he sees the destruction, and instead of rebuilding and helping these people reconstruct their homes and temples and businesses, he says, you know what? This space would make a really good place for my gigantuous palace. So he decides to build a great palace that becomes known as the Domus Aurea, or the Golden Palace. As you can see in this reconstructive drawing, it had an artificial lake. So not only did he steal the land of the people, but he also diverted aqueducts that provided water to the city to flow into his lake. So Nero was a terrible ruler. Everyone hated him. He was a tyrant. Finally, in 68 CE, riots break out in Rome. The Senate declares Nero a public enemy. Nero tries to get someone to kill him, like one of his friends, but it turns out he actually doesn't have any friends. No one comes and helps him kill himself, or no one comes to kill him because they think that would be too honorable of a death for him. Even his royal guard abandoned him. So finally he kills himself when the military approaches. He stabs himself in the throat. So at his death, General Vespasian becomes emperor in 69 to 79 CE. He reclaims the land of this palace for the Roman people. He destroys the palace, drains the lake, and where the lake was is where the Colosseum was built. Now you do have a video on the Colosseum, so I'm just going to kind of briefly talk about some points, and then the Colosseum video will kind of fill in some of those gaps there. But the Colosseum is Rome's greatest arena. It is an amphitheater. The Colosseum is basically two Roman theaters put together. Ampha in Greek is Greek for two theaters. It's not the first amphitheater in the Roman Empire, but the Romans didn't want to build one in Rome because they thought that it would make people violent and lazy. Rome was actually a really conservative place. But finally, under Vespasian, because of the horrific acts of Nero, they decided that something needed to be done for the people. So construction begins under Vespasian and it ends under Emperor Titus. It was actually originally called the Flavian Amphitheater. It became known as the Colosseum because there was a colossally large statue of Nero that stood outside of it. It was like 100 feet tall. The people hated Nero so much that Vespasian had to change the name of the statue to represent Helios, the sun god. So at first, people called this the amphitheater next to the Colossus statue. Then they simplified it to Colosseum, which means like of Colossus, really. It's 150 feet tall. It is made of concrete with like a marble-like. It's not actually a marble, but it has a marble-like veneer on it. So it's mostly concrete with this marble-like veneer. It was used to host athletic events, spectacles, animal hunts, gladiator fights, and things like that, and sometimes mock sea battles. The message of the Colosseum is a message of propaganda. It was built for the Roman people by Vespasian as a statement, giving the land back that Nero had taken from the people. And it also shows Romans' two big contributions to architecture, concrete and the arch.